Story 1. Some people claim Marilyn Monroe was murdered by the United States government. She frequently attempted suicide and would call someone on the landline beside her bed to come and save her. At the time of her death, no traces of poison were found in her stomach, and her colon had been unusually cleaned. One theory is that she was killed by poisoning administered via an enema. I have not researched this recently, so I may be misremembering details. Search for it on YouTube, it is quite interesting. Story 2. The Fresno police killed John Lang. I may have some details wrong because it has been a while since I read the story. John Lang was a journalist who was very critical of the Fresno Police Department. He wrote about officers entering poor neighborhoods and stopping cars parked in free parking lots. Eventually, he began noticing people watching his house in a manner he described as similar to Federal Bureau of Investigation surveillance. One night, he asked on Facebook to stay at someone else's home because he believed the police were going to kill him that night. When no one agreed, his house caught fire. The coroner initially said he had been stabbed to death, then retracted that statement. The coroner later concluded it was a suicide, not an accident. That sequence of events makes me believe the case is credible. Story 3. No way. The top comment that was just deleted accused administrators of fake gilding to gain traction on posts, and it was removed. Story 4. I used to live in a small town in South Dakota, and I am convinced there is something in the food or water that keeps people there. I am partially convinced it is actually the Dairy Queen causing this, because for a town of 7,000 people this place is always so busy, and somehow every year for the past 11 years, the entire length of this competition, it sells the most blizzards on Miracle Treat Day. A town of 7,000 outsells every other Dairy Queen. There are other odd things, such as a significant number of people with very similar disabilities affecting their left legs. I am just glad I left that town before it drew me in. How does that small town sell 40,000 blizzards in a single day? Story 5. The stories about Dan Schneider are troubling. Watching clips of the shows he produces is downright creepy. The tweets of his actress's feet do not help his cause. Story 6. Reddit's mobile site is intentionally broken to make you download the app. When I started using Reddit about 5 years ago, it worked fine. Now every other page loads as page not found. GiffyCat forces you to visit their website just to view a 5-second graphics interchange format animation. On top of that, they keep pushing the app on me even though I already downloaded it and refuse to use it. The app works terribly. Story 7. There is a secret society of people keeping Long John Silvers in business. Story 8. I suspect that some televangelists may not be entirely sincere in their beliefs. Story 9. I keep ink pens from every year, dating back to 2008, in my desk so that if I need to forge and backdate an important document, I can sign it with ink that matches the year I am backdating. Yes, federal investigators do check ink in fraud investigations. Not really a conspiracy, but it might answer a few questions. Story 10. Restaurant owners know how awkward it is to have staff sing to you in front of the whole establishment, so they do it to discourage people from taking advantage of free birthday food. Story 11. Reddit administrators receive unlimited Reddit gold and can award posts with gold to help them gain traction. Story 12. Why was the second highest rated comment removed? What the fuck is that bullshit? Story 13. iHeartRadio coordinates commercial breaks, so they all take place simultaneously, forcing you to listen to ads even if you change the station. They are practically a monopoly in my area, and I notice this happening to me all the time. Story 14. Every time someone posts about a safe on Reddit, they have already opened it and know it is empty before posting. Story 15. The United States deliberately enters an armed conflict about every decade to ensure it always has a critical mass of soldiers with combat experience. A country that spends so much on national defense likely values the institutional knowledge that continuity of practical experience provides, even if it comes at a high human cost. Story 16. This is more of a personal theory. I have been working as an American healthcare consultant for 2 years now, and I genuinely think that insurance companies are purposely denying claims so they can leverage dollars for their beneficiaries' medical records. For example, one of my clients, a huge and important hospital system, had to deal with hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical claim denials because Humana suddenly decided it did not consider any of those hospital stays legitimate. They told my client to either fax hundreds of medical records or accept a zero payment. It is suspicious and unfortunate, but when insurers control the money, what can you do? Story 17. Area 51 is not a site for secret government and military testing involving aliens and similar claims. Instead, Area 51 is a scapegoat while questionable activities take place at another military base that the general public does not know about. If you were truly going to do something in secrecy, would you conduct it where everyone expects it? I do not have specific evidence to support this, but it makes sense. Story 18. The Vela Incident. I collected Geiger counter data from a CubeSat a couple of years ago and recorded a significant radiation spike over a remote island. I searched the coordinates and found that it may be a secret Israeli South African nuclear testing site. An update. It was pointed out that the sensor I used probably cannot detect residual radiation from an old nuclear test. I retrieved the file and mapped it using Power Business Intelligence. The data appears to reflect a larger trend consistent with normal atmospheric variations rather than a nuclear signature. It is not definitive evidence, but it is my evidence. The first radiation spike I saw in the comma-separated values file was in the general region, which is how I first learned about the Vela incident. The dataset includes ultraviolet, infrared, magnetic, acceleration, and other sensor data. It was collected over 24 hours in low Earth orbit as a test to determine which sensors would collect the best data for an educational satellite project I was attempting to launch through my community college. If you are interested in low-cost, do-it-yourself satellites, Interorbital Systems offers a smaller standard called the TubeSat. The kit and launch cost about $8,000. Thanks for the awards, they made my day. Story 19. A forensic specialist believes Jamie Hewlett of Gorillaz is Banksy. It is not as big as other submissions here, but I find the theory convincing. Thank you to everyone who shared their theories in the comments. I accept several of them. Story 20. What I like about these threads is that some people reading the comments know something important about the theories but are not willing or able to provide that information here. Story 21. That Apple ad started the AirPods meme. Right before Christmas, they gave out $150 gift cards. Wow, I did not expect this to blow up. Thank you. Story 22. Disney made Zootopia partly to replace the Song of the South characters featured in Splash Mountain. Splash Mountain is essentially the only visible remnant of Song of the South in public consciousness, along with the song Zip-a-Dee-Doo-Dah, since Disney has largely acted as if the film does not exist. They created a movie with fox and rabbit characters that could replace Burr Fox and Burr Rabbit and retheme the ride to Zootopia while leaving some elements, such as the name and songs featured in the attraction, from Song of the South. Disney also frequently rethemes attractions to its intellectual property, for example replacing Maelstrom with a Frozen-themed ride, so it makes sense to retheme a ride to tie into a successful recent film rather than keep a ride based on an older, mildly racist movie the company is trying to move past. Story 23. Gum has become mintier lately. Have you noticed? Some of it is simply too minty. Story 24. Mason Jars created Pinterest to sell more jars. Edit. Wow, my first silver. Thank you, kind and mysterious stranger. Story 25. The 10-year challenge on social media is a way to collect more facial recognition data. Story 26. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter project cost overrun was actually a slush fund for secret research. Story 27. The lines on the detergent caps are higher than they should be, so you use more detergent for each load of laundry. It is so easy for them to get away with it. Story 28. I have a theory that Tinder sends fake, you got a new match notifications. So people get excited and open Tinder, which leads them to swipe more. Story 29. Not a conspiracy theory, but I have my moments of the Truman Show delusions. I think this has become a wide enough phenomenon that psychologists have even coined a term for it. There is a published report on the topic. Story 30. The Area 51 caller on Art Bell's show was a prank call, but it wasn't Brian Glass, as he claims. The connection dropping was pure coincidence. Art on the caller, taken from his Ask Me Anything, Area 51 caller. At the time it occurred, I absolutely thought it was real. There are others since who have expressed doubts. But it sure as hell was good radio. Story 31. A news report claimed that beards contain more bacteria than a dog that had just licked its own rear end. Beards are interfering with facial recognition software. Authorities want beards to stop being trendy. Story 32. Our apartment building has windows and sliding doors that are nearly impossible to fit with screens. The power is centralized and locked into a single expensive supplier. I believe the developer and the power company conspired to force residents to use air conditioning more by making it difficult to keep windows open without dozens of mosquitoes coming inside. I am Australian, and strict Australian rental laws severely limit what modifications I can make. Story 33. I am concerned that cocaine is being cut with fentanyl. Dealers who want to stay in business generally would not do this. It seems drugs are being intercepted, laced with dangerous substances, and then sent back out. This also happened during alcohol prohibition. Those responsible may believe they are doing society a favor. Story 34. Some people and celebrities fake their deaths to retire from the public eye. Story 35. Reddit works with the National Security Agency. I sometimes see targeted posts aimed at my demographic to elicit responses. Be aware you have no privacy here. Some users create throwaway accounts, which is a smart move. Story 36. I think the United States made a secret peace plan with China after the Korean War. I base this on how Chinese foreign policy changed so quickly and on China's lack of involvement in American wars in the decades that followed. I think it fell apart in the 1990s during the presidency of George H.W. Bush. Story 37. I used to tell people I believed the government listened to our phone calls. Years later, a man named Snowden proved me right. Story 38. Dust on Kleenex tissues can cause increased sneezing, leading you to use more tissues. Story 39. The authorities are not telling us everything they know about the Las Vegas shooting. Story 40. The Hawaii nuclear false alarm last year was actually the United States government testing to see how the general population would react if an actual nuclear war broke out. Story 41. I believe the government fabricates conspiracy theories to make questioning it seem crazy. Story 42. The countdown timers on advertisements for games or streaming services actually last longer than they seem and can feel excessive. Story 43. I think Apple is pushing their AirPods on consumers by making software updates increasingly incompatible with wired headphones. My reasoning is that my new headphones have started to consistently skip songs, activate Siri, and stop and start music without me touching or even moving them. I asked around and others report the same issue. Not to be a tinfoil hat person, but it makes me suspicious. Story 44. Conspiracy. My local Jimmy John's waits until they have 3 to 4 orders to deliver before they bring me my sandwich. Evidence. Where is my sandwich? Story 45. I am convinced that Hostess going under a few years ago was a marketing ploy. Story 46. 23andMe is run by the government to collect your deoxyribonucleic acid and store it in a database for later. Story 47. Banks and landowners conspire to manipulate urban land prices. They can turn an area into a ghetto by labeling it a high-risk loan area and denying loans there. Property values plummet in the downtown area because people cannot sell or obtain loans. Once prices fall enough, they buy prime downtown land at pennies on the dollar and redevelop it to its true market value plus the cost of development. Story 48. When Ted Kaczynski, known as the Unabomber, was at Harvard, he participated in a brutal psychological experiment led by Professor Henry Murray. The experiment lasted 3 years and by many accounts had an extreme impact on Kaczynski's psyche. I think this experiment was part of the MKUltra program run by the Central Intelligence Agency and destabilized Kaczynski enough that he eventually went on a reign of terror, sending packages containing bombs around the country. During the MKUltra program, the Central Intelligence Agency collaborated with university professors on mind control experiments, but much of the documentation was destroyed when people started to investigate. Summary. The Unabomber participated in an experiment that was part of the MKUltra program, which may have contributed to his later crimes. Story 49. Michael Jordan's father was murdered in retribution for Jordan failing to pay off a massive gambling debt. Jordan did not retire and then come back. He was suspended for gambling. In the mid-1990s, Michael Jordan was in industry. The truth about his gambling habits may have cost many people a great deal of money, so a cover story was presented. I admit the part about his father's murder is a bit of a stretch, but this is a thread about conspiracy theories after all. As for the suspension, I stand by that 100%. Story 50. I believe that chapstick causes my lips to become drier a couple of hours after use. This is based on the fact that my lips are drier 5 hours after use than 2 days later. Story 51. Original posters gild their own submissions from alternative accounts to give them traction. Removed comments in this thread discuss this, and the original comment was gilded and removed in less than 30 minutes. Story 52. Bandersnatch, the Black Mirror Netflix special, collected viewers' data to better greenlight productions aligned with their tastes. Story 53. I wrote an online complaint about a pizza place after they canceled my order without notifying me, and the next order I received was severely messed up. The pizza was undercooked, not cut, and they did not include the ranch I always get with it. When I called to report the problem, the manager seemed unapologetic and appeared to already know what I was calling about. I suspect they retaliated because I had reported them to corporate through their website with my initial complaint. They credited a free pizza to my account, but I decided not to order from them anymore. The pizza was mediocre anyway. Story 54. I believe in the mattress store conspiracy. That mattress stores are used for money laundering. I searched Google Maps for mattress stores near me and found 4 in the same shopping center. One road had 5 mattress stores within a mile. That convinced me. Story 55. All my devices listen to me. The other day I argued with my dad about some chicken I thought had gone off. It had been frozen for about a month, so we were unsure, but my dad insisted it was still edible. Dad asked Google, and lo and behold, the related searches from the first letter were, is chicken edible after being frozen for a month? And how long can you freeze chicken before it goes off? Also, my mom and I use a tactic. If we call a company and are placed in a queue, we swear at the system. It then puts you on a priority list and you do not have to wait as long. Kind of sketchy on the company's part. Story 56. I believe there is a widespread problem of pedophilia among the upper echelons of society. Whether it is uncovered in the Catholic Church, the British Parliament, Hollywood, Washington, District of Columbia, or Saudi Arabia, the mainstream media does not seem interested in shining a light on the networks and procurers who allow this practice to thrive. Remember when Sacha Baron Cohen inadvertently uncovered an underage sex service in Las Vegas? Imagine the demand required for this heinous practice to exist, offered by the concierge no less. Who is the mystery party requesting secrecy in Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking suit? Why was Johnny Rotten banned from the British Broadcasting Corporation for attempting to expose Jimmy Savile for sickening crimes against children? These types of stories are far too common, and they do not receive the attention they deserve. I left out Pizzagate because most people check out at that point, and this issue is too important for people to disregard. Just remember that Comet Ping Pong is not Pizzagate. The story first gained traction after the infamous spirit cooking emails were released by WikiLeaks. Soon after, readers began discovering cryptic emails using code words like pizza and pasta. Tony Podesta's taste in art, which features disturbing images of sexualized children, was later brought into question. Remember that Comet Ping Pong is irrelevant. Do not let the media move the goalposts. Story 57. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was not an accident. There appear to have been external forces involved in its disappearance. The flight path was diverted multiple times, and there were reports of suspicious circumstances involving some passengers and the pilot. We may never know unless the plane is found. Story 58. Some people claim that a large pedophile ring exists in Hollywood, and that anyone who tries to expose it dies shortly afterward. These claims are unverified. Story 59. Apple keeps changing the heads of its chargers because it wants to annoy me. Evidence. I am always annoyed. Story 60. I believe Apple intentionally started the wearing AirPods equals being cool and rich meme to boost sales. AirPods became the best-selling wireless earbuds worldwide after the meme. Story 61. We did not have an apocalypse in 2012. Instead, we shifted into an almost parodic timeline of events. That is why humanity's future looks bleaker every year. Story 62. John F. Kennedy. There was definitely something shady going on there. Story 63. I am starting to believe that anti-dandruff shampoo actually causes dandruff. Story 64. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals was formed by meat companies to make animal rights activists look like idiots. The majority of animal rights activists do not like the organization. It wastes much of its time criticizing video games and cartoons, and it has killed many stray dogs for not being purebreds. I might have some of the details of that last claim wrong. Story 65. The United States of America will never add colleges to public funding like they did high schools because then the enlistment rate for the military would plummet. Source. Everyone I know joined the military service just to help pay for school. Holy crap, this was a lot of notifications to wake up to. The question did say, conspiracy theories you believe, so comments arguing against me just make me giggle. And thanks, kind stranger, for my first silver. I never would have thought this little comment would blow up. Story 66. The government uses social media to manipulate and measure public sentiment. Story 67. When a comment in one of these threads is removed, it is because it is true and someone with the authority to remove it wants it hidden. I do not have direct evidence yet. If this comment is removed, the removal itself will serve as evidence, but the comment will be gone. Note at 1:30 Anti-Meridium Eastern Standard Time, April 23, 2019. For people saying that now they would not delete it because I called out the negative consequences, that was intentional. I had to keep the comment visible somehow. Also, as tempting as it is, I am not going to delete the comment myself. It would not be convincing to the trained eye, because removed by moderator is hard to fake, and why falsify evidence when there is already plenty? Many of you saw the thread about administrators and gold. Why go any further? Story 68. Modern drug prohibition is a for-profit endeavor perpetrated by governments for the benefit of pharmaceutical corporations, the prison industrial complex, and warlords. Story 69. Orenthal James Simpson did not do it. It was Jason Simpson. Orenthal James Simpson did not do it. Nicole Brown was nearly decapitated, and Ron Goldman was stabbed more than 20 times and had numerous defensive wounds. The prosecution argued the injuries were consistent with two knives and produced a stiletto knife, which is effective for stabbing but not cutting, and a Swiss Army knife, which is not effective for harming anyone other than the user. Simpson had only a small cut on his hand with no other evidence of having been in a fight. The only blood found in his home consisted of a few drops of his own blood that were contaminated with a preservative used in blood draws. Jason Simpson did it. Jason worked as a sous chef, had his own knife set, and owned a double-edged combat knife. He was cooking alone at his restaurant that night and had specifically invited Nicole Brown to come see him cook. She stood him up and went to Mezzaluna, where Ron Goldman worked. Jason was known to be bothered by Nicole seeing men other than his father. Jason had opportunity. His time card that night was handwritten for a time much later than when the restaurant closed. His alibi changed several times, and the last time anyone could definitely account for him was around 9:30 that night. Notably, the day after the murders, Orenthal James Simpson retained one of Los Angeles's top criminal defense attorneys to represent Jason Simpson and did not hire his own defense attorney until several days later. Story 70. Every Trader Joe's has a small or otherwise difficult to navigate parking lot. This is done intentionally to make the stores look busy. Check your local Trader Joe's and try to drive through the lot. You'll likely find it difficult. That's because they all do. Story 71. Most anti-smoking and anti-vaping ads, including truth ads, are funded by tobacco companies. That is not a conspiracy. It is a fact. Sometime in the 1980s, the industry was sued, and part of the settlement required them to fund anti-smoking ads. It may technically be an opinion, but I don't think many people will disagree that most of those ads are extremely annoying. I think that's on purpose so people will ignore them. In fact, I have almost wanted to smoke just to spite the ads. Story 72. All conspiracy theories, even those that contradict each other, are true. Story 73. Disney made a movie called Frozen so that when people search for Frozen and Disney together, information about the movie appears instead of stories about Walt Disney's frozen head. Story 74. Lindsey Graham is gay. He is not too ugly. He has never been in a relationship with a woman during his congressional career, and he would have reason to in South Carolina. Story 75. The fact that Barack Obama was not assassinated, despite being the first black president, and that Donald Trump has not been assassinated, suggests that ordinary people do not kill presidents. Rather, the government does. Story 76. What evidence led you to this conclusion? No one provides any evidence. Story 77. I believe that bankers and Congress knew the housing market would collapse. Why else would they change the bankruptcy laws in 2005 to make it harder to avoid foreclosure 3 years before the collapse? Story 78. 3 years ago, I received a recording of my arrest in which the dialogue had been altered to portray the officer's actions more positively. I spent a long time gathering evidence, analyzing clues, and reconstructing what happened. I compiled my findings into a video and posted it on Reddit. People said the video was too long, and I lost hope and stopped fighting. Too long. Didn't read. Police are editing tapes and no one cares enough to act. Edit. Thanks for the suggestions. I have tweeted at Shane Dawson as requested. Please help boost the tweet. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.